Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a world where everyone wants to be seen. Everyone's talking, tweeting, snapping, posting. But let me tell you something powerful. Let me tell you something right now. You don't need applause to be powerful. You don't need recognition to be relevant. And you certainly don't need noise to grow. What you need is focus. And what you must cultivate is silence. There's an illusion in the modern world that activity equals progress, that visibility equals value. But the truth is, some of the most powerful transformations happen away from the crowd, in quiet rooms, in early mornings, in long nights where the world isn't watching. That's where strength is built. That's where clarity is formed. That's where excellence is refined. When you spend your time watching others, comparing your journey to someone else's, you start disqualifying the very uniqueness that sets you apart. You're not called to duplicate, you're called to dominate in your own lane. That's why your focus must become your obsession. Focus is not about doing more, it's about doing what matters most. It's about eliminating distractions so you can amplify your power. Most people are addicted to distraction. Scrolling through highlights, chasing dopamine hits, seeking approval from people who don't even know their name, and yet they wonder why their dreams stay distant and their potential untapped. The moment you start guarding your time like your life depends on it, because it does, is the moment your future starts shifting. The world will tempt you to perform, to prove, to announce, but wisdom says, do the work, keep your mouth shut, and let the results speak. Silence isn't weakness, it's warfare. Silence doesn't mean you're passive, it means you're strategic. A lion doesn't roar when it's hunting, it moves in silence and strikes with precision. So must you. You see, when you stay silent, you conserve your energy for what really matters. You stop leaking your power through endless talking and begin investing that power into execution. You stop trying to be understood and start focusing on understanding your assignment. You stop seeking validation and start walking in purpose. That's when real change begins. Focusing on yourself doesn't mean you're selfish. It means you've realized that the best way to bless others is to become the highest version of yourself. It means you've stopped trying to fix the world before fixing your habits, your mindset, your routines. You begin working on your craft. You begin investing in your health. You begin studying relentlessly. You begin praying and seeking wisdom. You begin sharpening your thinking so that when you do speak, your words carry weight. The world is full of noise, but few voices carry authority. And authority comes from preparation. It comes from mastery. It comes from walking through fire without needing to post every burn. Your private battles produce public power. Your hidden discipline creates visible elevation. But none of that happens if you keep giving the world your focus and ignoring the inner man. The people who grow, who rise, who lead, they all have one thing in common. They know when to speak and when to stay silent. They know when to share and when to remain unseen. They're not driven by attention, they're driven by alignment. They don't announce every move, they let the move announce them. You've got to be okay being misunderstood for a season. You've got to be okay being overlooked while you build. You've got to be okay sitting in silence while your spirit is being fortified and your skills are being sharpened, because when the time comes and the spotlight finds you, you'll be ready. Not because you talked loud, but because you stood firm. Because you focused, not flailed. Because you were patient enough to stay hidden until your season of impact arrived. Most people spend their entire lives reacting to the world around them instead of creating the world within them. They allow the noise of other people's opinions, the distractions of trends, and the weight of judgment to determine their next move. But true power, true transformation comes when you turn inward and begin doing the deep work that nobody claps for. It's easy to talk about goals, to post about ambition, to wear confidence like a costume. What's hard is waking up early when no one is watching, pushing through resistance when it would be easier to quit, saying no to comfort when mediocrity invites you in, Focusing on yourself means taking full responsibility for your growth, your habits, your mindset, your future. It means understanding that nobody is coming to save you, and everything you desire is on the other side of your own discipline. The loudest people in the room are often the most insecure, and the quietest ones are often the most dangerous because they're building in silence. They're learning, training, improving, locking in on their goals while others are wasting time trying to impress. When you stay silent, you force yourself to listen. You start hearing the patterns, the lessons, the divine instructions that only come when you're not talking. You begin to discern what to ignore, what to engage, and what to eliminate altogether. Your attention becomes your greatest asset, and your ability to protect that attention becomes the foundation of your success. The truth is, your future is shaped by what you do daily, not what you say occasionally. Every moment you spend explaining yourself to people who aren't even invested in your journey is a moment stolen from your death. Every argument you entertain, every debate you enter just to be right, drains the energy you could have used to execute. Silence is not the absence of power, it is the container of power. It is in silence that ideas are formed, that breakthroughs are born, that clarity emerges. You cannot build if you're constantly broadcasting. You cannot create if you're always consuming. You cannot lead if you've never followed your own convictions in solitude. Focus means drawing a boundary around your priorities and protecting them with relentless intention. It means learning to say no without guilt and yes without apology. It means refusing to let urgency rob you of what's truly important. The people who accomplish great things are not always the most talented or the most connected, but they are the most focused. They understand that success is not about doing everything. It's about doing the right things repeatedly. And they are not concerned with applause because they've learned that real applause comes in the form of results. When you focus on yourself, you begin to confront the patterns that have been holding you back. You begin to audit your thoughts, your relationships, your routines. You stop blaming others and start building the discipline to change. You recognize that if your environment doesn't support your vision, it must be adjusted. You no longer waste energy proving your worth. You start increasing your worth through action. You invest in books instead of gossip, in solitude instead of validation, in mastery instead of mediocrity. The world doesn't need more opinions, it needs more examples. And the only way to become an example is to turn down the volume of the world and turn up the volume of your inner work. There is a season for silence, and that season is sacred. It's where strength is formed. It's where distractions are removed. It's where clarity is found. And it's where the foundation of everything you desire is laid, brick by brick, through quiet, consistent, focused action. There is a kind of strength that doesn't shout, doesn't boast, doesn't demand attention, but it transforms everything it touches. It's the strength that's built in silence, developed through discipline, and sustained by focus. When you focus on yourself and stay silent, you remove the distractions that dilute your power. You stop giving your energy to conversations that don't serve your purpose. You stop participating in arguments that don't move you forward. You stop allowing the outside world to pull you away from the inner work that is required for true transformation. The truth is, not everyone deserves access to your process. Not everyone should be in the room when you're building. Not everyone is qualified to hear your plans, because some people come to contaminate, not to contribute. When you stay silent, you protect the blueprint. You safeguard your momentum. You create a sacred space for growth that cannot be interfered with by doubt, negativity, or distraction. Focus demands that you stop trying to explain your vision to people who have no capacity to understand it. You are not required to make sense to those who have never built what you're trying to build. Your silence becomes a wall that protects your progress. It allows you to refine your thoughts, to get clear on your strategy, to make decisions from a place of strength rather than emotion. Most people talk too much because they lack clarity. They think out loud instead of thinking deeply. They speak before they've studied. They share, before they've shaped their ideas into something real. But when you learn to stay silent, you begin to value your words. You begin to measure your speech. You speak with purpose, not just noise. And when you finally open your mouth, what you say carries weight. Focusing on yourself doesn't mean ignoring the world. It means preparing yourself so that when you do show up in the world, you bring something of substance. It means being so locked in on your goals, your habits, your mindset, that nothing can pull you out of alignment. You wake up each day with intention. You control your inputs. You choose your environments. You set your pace. You don't rush because you understand that mastery takes time. You don't brag because you understand that results speak louder than words. You don't compare because you understand that your only competition is the person you were yesterday. In the silence, you find your real self. You uncover the beliefs that have been limiting you. You confront the fears that have been hiding beneath your busy schedule. You become aware of the patterns that have kept you stuck, and you begin the process of breaking them. That process is not glamorous. It doesn't get likes or comments. It doesn't draw crowds, but it changes everything. Because once you shift internally, the external world must respond. Focus gives you direction. Silence gives you power. And together, they produce results that cannot be ignored. The more you grow, the less you feel the need to talk about it. The more you heal, the less you need others to validate you. The more you develop yourself, the more you realize how little the noise matters. You begin to understand that elevation is quiet, that breakthrough is personal, that progress is often invisible at first, but with time, the fruit reveals the root. What you built in silence becomes undeniable. What you developed in solitude begins to shine. And what you nurtured through focus begins to overflow into every area of your life. When you make the decision to focus on yourself and stay silent, you are stepping into a space where transformation becomes inevitable. Most people live their lives in reaction to noise. What they see on social media, what they hear from critics, what they fear others might say. But when you choose to pull back, to turn inward, and to direct your attention toward your own growth, you begin to take command of your destiny. You start becoming the architect of your life instead of a passenger in someone else's narrative. Focusing on yourself requires a level of honesty that most people run from. It demands that you confront your own patterns, your own procrastination, your own excuses. It requires you to look at the man or woman in the mirror and say, it's not them, it's me. And when you get to that point, when you stop shifting blame and start accepting responsibility, that's when the real work begins. It's in that silence, in that solitude, where the foundation of greatness is built. The silence allows you to disconnect from the external chaos and connect with the voice inside, the one that's been buried under noise, fear, and distraction. That voice knows your purpose. That voice knows your assignment, but you'll never hear it if you're always talking, always proving, always chasing validation. There's a reason builders lay the foundation before putting up the walls. The foundation is quiet work. It's deep work. It doesn't get attention, but without it, the entire structure will collapse. That's what focusing on yourself is. It's laying your foundation in private so your results can stand strong in public. You begin by identifying your core values. What do you stand for? What are you building? Who are you becoming? Then you start cutting off anything that doesn't align with that. You reduce the time spent with people who drain your energy. You stop engaging in conversations that add no value. You stop explaining yourself to people who've already made up their minds. Your silence becomes your shield. It protects your peace. It guards your energy. It keeps you from making emotional decisions that sabotage your progress. And the more you stay in that zone, the more you realize how much power you gave away by trying to be seen, trying to be heard, trying to be liked. Silence helps you regain that power. It centers you. It clarifies your vision. It teaches you to observe instead of react. When you're focused, you begin to track your habits. You study your routines. You analyze what's working and what's wasting your time. You start optimizing every part of your day because you understand that time is not something to be spent, it's something to be invested. You protect your mornings. You simplify your commitments. You build systems around your goals. This is the work that builds momentum. The kind of momentum that doesn't need motivation because it's driven by vision. And that vision becomes clearer the more silent you become. You stop letting the noise of the world determine your worth. You stop letting people's opinions dictate your direction. You begin to walk with quiet confidence, knowing that what you're building will speak for itself. You don't need to prove anything because the fruit of your focus will prove everything. Every day becomes intentional. Every decision becomes strategic. Every step becomes aligned with where you're going, not where you've been. That's the shift. That's the power of focus and silence working together. You are no longer scattered. You are centered. You are no longer drained. You are deliberate. You are no longer just existing. You are evolving. When you focus on yourself and stay silent, you give yourself the permission to grow without pressure, without performance, without pretense. You step into a space where your energy is no longer divided between becoming and explaining. Most people don't reach their full potential, not because they lack ability, but because they waste too much time managing impressions. They want everyone to see their journey, approve their decisions, and applaud their process. But true growth doesn't need an audience. It needs attention, and that attention must be undivided. That's what focus is. Undivided attention on what matters most. You begin to strip away everything that does not serve the vision. You stop entertaining conversations that go nowhere. You stop negotiating with procrastination. You stop chasing temporary satisfaction and start cultivating long-term transformation. The silence is where you face yourself without filters, no performance, no applause, just you and the reality of who you are and who you're becoming. In that space, you find out what you really believe, what you really value, and what you really want. That's where your real power lives, not in the noise of affirmation, but in the clarity of self-awareness. When you stop broadcasting every move, you start building real momentum. You learn to value your privacy because that's where you develop precision. That's where you can fail, correct, and repeat without judgment. That's where you refine your strategy and elevate your standards. You're no longer performing for validation, you're preparing for victory. You become so focused on your assignment that you no longer need to respond to critics, doubters, or distractions. Their noise doesn't reach you because your discipline drowns it out. And when you're silent, you can hear things others miss. You can discern patterns, notice opportunities, and recognize lessons disguised as obstacles. The silent builder becomes the wise builder, and the wise builder becomes the unshakable force. This kind of focus also reveals who really supports you. When you stop sharing every detail, you find out who's checking on your well-being and who is just entertained by your updates. You learn to move in silence, not to be mysterious, but to be intentional. You are building a life, not a brand. You are cultivating substance, not just a story. You are investing in mastery, not popularity. And that requires solitude. That requires discipline. That requires a level of focus that most people won't understand. But that's the cost of greatness. There are seasons where silence is your greatest ally. It keeps you grounded. It keeps you humble. It keeps you accountable to the work instead of the attention. You start measuring your growth by how consistent you are, not by how visible you are. You start defining success by your inner peace, not by external praise. You build strength in silence, so that when the pressure comes, you don't fold, you flourish. Because you've done the work when no one was watching. You've made the sacrifices when no one was applauding. You've stayed consistent when no one was acknowledging. That's the kind of power that lasts. That's the kind of power that can't be shaken. And when the time comes, your results will speak for you louder than your words ever could. Your fruit will prove your roots. Your excellence will expose your effort, and your character will validate your calling. But it all begins with focus. It all begins with silence. It all begins with the decision to turn inward, to do the work, to stay hidden, and to rise only when the work has made you ready. When you truly begin to focus on yourself and stay silent, you realize how much of your power was being drained by unnecessary noise. You begin to understand that growth isn't something that happens in front of a crowd. It happens in solitude, in stillness, in the quiet moments when no one is watching. The world has trained people to believe that success must be public, that every move must be broadcasted, that validation is a sign of value. But the ones who rise to the top are often the ones who first disappeared for a season, not to hide, but to build. They weren't concerned with being seen. They were focused on becoming someone worth seeing. They weren't trying to convince others of their greatness. They were becoming great through consistent, silent work. Focusing on yourself is not about selfishness. It's about stewardship. It's about stewarding your time, your energy, your gifts, your purpose. It's about realizing that if you don't build your own vision, you'll spend your life being used to build someone else's. And silence is what allows you to sharpen your focus. When the noise dies down, the truth rises up. You begin to see what needs to change, what needs to go, and what needs to grow. You stop making excuses because there's no one left to impress. It's just you, your future, and the choices you make every single day. That's where transformation begins. When you silence the opinions of others, you find your own voice. When you shut off the distractions, you hear your own thoughts. When you stop running from stillness, you finally face what's been holding you back. The more you focus on yourself, the more you realize how much time you wasted explaining yourself, how much energy you gave to people who never intended to support you, how many moments you lost trying to be understood instead of being focused. And when that awareness hits, you shift. You become more intentional. You start treating your life like it matters. You start protecting your peace like it's priceless. You start choosing your words carefully because you've learned the weight they carry. You stop posting everything, sharing everything, proving everything. You let your results speak in a voice that silence helped shape. You develop habits that anchor your progress. You build systems that align with your values. You become disciplined in the unseen places, which prepares you for breakthroughs in the public ones. You stop reacting and start creating. You stop complaining and start changing. You stop seeking affirmation and start standing in authority. Silence teaches you patience. It teaches you to wait for your moment without rushing. It teaches you that everything has a season and that delay does not mean denial. It teaches you that strength is built in the preparation, not just in the performance. You realize that being quiet doesn't mean being passive. It means being powerful enough to choose your words, to manage your time, and to direct your energy with wisdom. Silence becomes your filter, removing the unnecessary so only the essential remains. When you focus on yourself and stay silent, your circle starts to change. The people who were only around for entertainment disappear. The people who can't handle your growth fall away. The people who respect your boundaries start to rise around you. And that's how your environment begins to match your vision, because you've cultivated it in silence. You've protected it with focus. You've nurtured it through discipline. And now, without noise, without announcement, without applause, your life begins to reflect the investment you've made in private. Here is the best conclusion to wrap up all 6 keynotes under the theme, Focus on Yourself and Stay Silent. Written in the same powerful, educational, and Myron Golden inspired style, the world doesn't need more noise. It needs more people willing to do the deep, quiet work that leads to real change. When you focus on yourself, you stop being distracted by comparison, by criticism, by applause, and by opinions that have no investment in your destiny. And when you stay silent, you protect your process, you preserve your power, and you position yourself for a greater impact than words could ever deliver. This journey isn't about proving anything to anyone. It's about becoming everything you were created to be. Growth is not a performance. Mastery is not a public show. True transformation begins when you decide to build in silence, move with intention, and rise on the strength of who you are, not what you say. Let your focus become your fortress. Let your silence become your strategy. And let your results speak for everything you chose not to explain.